Good morning, everyone, or in some cases, early morning for people. I'm Bob Putnam, and joining me is Kimberly Yannick, and we're going to talk about building coaching capacity, which we both think in working with schools and districts and states is a huge lever to improve treatment fidelity and, most important, student outcomes. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I didn't look this way when I first started. And I'm an executive vice president of PBS at the May Institute and a funded partner of the National Technical Assistance for the last 18 years, and also work for the National Autism Center. And Kimberly, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I've been doing this for about 20 years too, Bob, and I look the same as I always have. Bob and I have been having a really good time doing this together. So I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I'm at Old Dominion University with the Center for Social Behavioral Support, and also TA Director for the Center on PBIS. So thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to talking with you and walking with you this morning through this information.
And I'm from the Boston area, as you can probably tell by my accent. I park the car in Harvard Yard on a regular basis. So just you just have to put up with that. We're wicked smart in Boston. So anyway, we're going to get rolling. We have a number of polls. We love to have people, if you want to make comments or ask questions in terms of Go Sox, I love it. So anything along those lines, we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. And Kimberly's going to be Vanna White today, and will be the person who's forwarding the slides. All right, so we're going to explore possibilities for building shared capacity of individuals to really utilize the most efficient and effective coaching practices as a way of work to really facilitate your teams, whether it's at the state level or at the district level or at the school level, or in some cases at the classroom level, to how do you help people through the process? Because as we know, this is just not a set of practices, but this is really systems work, systems change, and coaching is really important, as we've said, in terms of both building treatment integrity as well as sustainability. Next. So we're going to look at look at roles and responsibilities of a coach, and then possible skills, competencies, and content to achieve meaning and measurable outcomes. A process to build that capacity. And on the other hand, many of you already have a coaching capacity. Is really how do you look at in terms of enhancing and strengthening what you're already doing, right? That's our goal is. If you're starting out, how do you basically start out? Or if in fact you're in the middle of it, how do we give you some suggestions for that? We have a lot of free, I underline free, resources that we have. Oftentimes when I attend webinars, one of the things I want to walk away is kind of how do I go to the next step? And so our goal is really not to have this train and hope webinar, but train and support webinar. So we want to check in terms of who's here today. So if you can just fill off the Zoom, that would be really cool. Another 10 seconds. We got 100%. Look at that, 100% completed poll. That's the best I've seen so far in terms of people completing the poll. So we have about 42% from the district and from the state. So our goal is really looking at how do you enhance what you currently have for coaching, and on the other hand is how to build that coaching network. And we'll also talk about school as well, but we're really going to talk about at the district and state level. And then we have another poll for you. So is this,
I do, Bob. And since you put me in charge of vanning, I might need some help from our.
How about that?
Because I don't see poll number 2 here, and that's okay if we don't have it. There it is.
Oh, yeah, great job.
I didn't do it, but thank you anyways.
Oh, okay. Oh, another 100%. Yeah, I love it. So we have a 29%, actually 32% at this point in time from the district leadership, and then 20% in terms of administration. And if we can pull that down, because there's got to be another. State leadership, 16%. And we have actually about a third of the folks on here, coaches, consultants, technical assistance provider. So we're really happy here, and we're going to try to focus on these particular areas for you during this webinar. So I'm just seeing you, Kimberly. Okay, great. All right. So really, we want to look at the roles and responsibility of a coach as a noun, right? That kind of what are those roles and responsibilities that make a great coach? And so we really want to talk about what those things here and give you some tools that you can use to assess your coaching competencies. So we're really looking at in terms of we're coaching for systems change, right? Really. We're looking at how do we adapt to the either at the district level or at the state level or at the school level to where the schools or the districts are at. Particularly in terms of the cultural climate, it's different if it's a high school that we're trying to work with 4,000 kids who speak 39 languages than, in fact, a little elementary school that has 120 kids, right? And basically has very little diversity. So the goal would be, how do we look at the culture and climate and context of the organization that we're coaching? And probably we would look at in terms of changing what we're doing based on that, right? And so our goal is the traditional way we've done professional development is the train and hope approach. We're doing kind of a little train and hope event today, right? That we're hoping we're giving you some information, right? That one is kind of what's the identified problem, right? How do we figure out, hopefully it's an evidence-based practice. How do we bring that expert in and do the hour after school training in terms of that? And then how do we expect and hope for implementation? And then, we wait for the new problem to come in. So the goal really is to look at taking this system along those lines and really build the coaching in so that we may still hire the expert to train the practice, but the expert's also training the coaches to have more expertise. So when the expert leaves, then the coach can really look at in terms of continuing to facilitate the process. All right, so what do you call people who are supporting change in your school? Right? Do you call them coaches, consultants, facilitators, trainers, technical assistance providers, behavioral specialists, or any other terms, right? If you can just put that in the chat. And Kimberly, I can't see the chat. So
I can see it, Bob, and I'll tell you what kind of responses you got. Yeah. Coaches, we call them coaches, people who are supporting change. All of them.
All of them. Okay, great.
We call them leaders.
Okay.
Coach. Thank you all for contributing to this. All of the above.
And I see Mary Ann Nickel raised her hand. So I don't know how to recognize her, but.
So Mary Ann, how about we give just 10 seconds, and then if you want to come off mute and you have a question, or if you want to use chat, either way, Bob and I are, it's not a large group today, so we can do that. You also got some other language, behavior support specialists, instructional support teachers, consultants, coaches, lead teachers. So lots of different titles, if you will, people are using.
And we think that's great. The goal would be to use the people you have, but you want to come up with a standardized way you train and standardized way you help support your coaches to be more successful.
So Mary Ann, if you're, there you are, behavior specialists and coaches. Okay. So she's got both as well. Anything else, Mary Ann? Do you have a question or are you good? She's like, I'm not going to raise my hand again. Okay. We're good to go. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So for all of these people, what are the similarities in terms of their responsibilities? What are the differences? Why does it even matter, right? That's what we want you to kind of think about that in terms of people may have different. So I have behavior analysts that I work with. That part of the hats they wear is to provide individual consultation around kids with teachers and staff. But there will also end up to be the coaches in the school or the district. So they have kind of multiple hats that they wear. And it probably is in the schools or districts that you work that people may have multiple hats. Or, if you are able to have dedicated coaches, both in external coaches to the schools, which would be at the district level, or internal coaches within the school. As the example I just gave you is an internal coach within the school that has kind of multiple hats. In terms of that, the goal is really maximizing people's ability to provide coaching. And from our end, we really think that we should be dedicating a portion of the person's FTE to coaching, and not just as an added duty on top of what they're already doing, right? So we would suggest that you really carve out part of that FTE specifically for coaching, rather than you're going to layer coaching on top of what people already do.
And Bob, I love how you just you distinguish between internal, external, and I would be curious to know from our everyone joining today, how did you arrive at that language? Does it matter if you call them a coach, a consultant, a behavior specialist? Like, what are your thoughts on that? How you use these different terminology? How does it impact what you're doing?
If you can just put that in the chat, that'd be great.
I'm using good wait time, Bob.
Okay.
It depends in part on who's being coached. Oh, Gordon, that's such a great consideration. Absolutely. I don't think it matters as long as the job expectations are clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are all good considerations. Great, Sandy. Thank you.
All right, so and somebody said that, right? This is kind of what's the point of entry, right, for this, and we're getting a whole bunch of more chat. One is our schools were trained by and it just disappeared off my screen. I think it's really helpful to differentiate between what is expected from internal coach versus, I assume, an external coach in terms of that. So in our district, the administration is considered the enemy. So when I come in as a coach, I feel like, here we go. I feel like it's more beneficial to say I'm with them and I just want to help coach and guide them. Yeah, I would feel the same way in some of the districts I work in. One of the things I always say is relationships matter, and that, the goal is to really be a positive supporter in terms of what's going on, and a cheerleader. In one of the other presentations I do around coaches, I actually have a slide that shows the person as being a cheerleader, because we really want to have the people both be a positive nag and a cheerleader in terms of the efforts. All right, so we'll just keep moving here. All right. So what's the point of entry? For these, and as all of you have pointed out, it depends kind of where you're at. As we've talked about in terms of, what does the time allocation? Is it clear with the expectations? And somebody pointed that out. What are the expectations and what's the time commitment with those expectations? Is it different from tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3? Is it different in terms of which team you're coaching? Is it different in terms of the adults, or if you're doing some coaching with your students? And as you break out the coaching role, is it more spent in training, coaching, consulting? And some of this is where you are in your process of implementation, that you're probably doing a lot more training in the beginning, and then a lot more in terms of helping people actually to put the big ideas into place. And then looking at in terms of how do you facilitate to keep them on track, using the data to really make good database decisions.
So the next learning intention, or the next chunk now that we've kind of talked about, what is language that we attach to individuals who are supporting change in our organization, we want to take a moment just to think about the possible either skill sets, competencies, any of the content necessary for effective coaching, and just explore some examples, and then hear from you as well, thinking about, what is it specifically you're asking people to do, and thinking about those guiding questions that Bob just went over, the entry points. Who are we coaching? Is it individuals? Is it a team? Is it a system? How is their time allocation? What does that look like? Do they spend more time at tier 1 or tier 3? Or how have you thought through those things? And so Brian Gaunt and I think it's April, March, USF put together this fantastic resource on systems coaching. And they kind of laid out for us some considerations for content. So some of these you may be looking at and think, oh, yes, this is where we focus. We focus on classroom management strategies or classroom behavior systems. Or maybe you're focusing on some more systemic issues like a multi-tiered system of support or change strategies. Or perhaps it's teaming, like how do we build effective teams? And so these are just some examples. I've used this throughout my work as an anchor. And I'm curious, they're kind of numbered, they are numbered: instruction and pedagogy, systems issues, and then teaming. Where do you see yourselves, maybe either a strength, you could just put strength, and or an area that you had conversation or you've been thinking we need to prioritize, maybe strengthening? Would it be the first area, number 1, instruction and pedagogy, number 2, systems issues, or number 3, around teaming? And you can use the chat. Two and three. Okay. 2 and 3. Okay. That's helpful. A lot of 2 in this work. Yes. 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. I love that, Bren. That teaming as the foundation. That's a great kind of balcony view, if you will. Strength is number 2, 3 needs improvement. Hearing that a lot, Paula, with teams. There's been so much change in personnel and having to maintain that capacity. Yeah, thank you all for your contributions there. So those are some examples of perhaps content areas. And for me, this is my anchor, my go-to. Building tier 1 had a need to incorporate tier. Okay. Yeah, tier 1 we know is perhaps where we spend our greatest amount of time and so important to this work. Okay, incorporate tier 2. Excellent. So we also might consider, if we're talking about any of the roles or the names that I heard you all give to people who support change, leaders, behavior specialists, coaches, consultants, etc., interpersonal skills. And from that same resource, March and Gaunt, they just give us a couple that we might consider. And so I think it's important for us to identify clearly. Someone said in the chat, it doesn't matter if we define expectations clearly. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. What are you expecting in terms of skill sets and competencies of the people who are supporting change? And so these are just some examples. And I think it's important to identify those clearly because it informs your professional learning and capacity building efforts to the folks who are supporting the change. Another resource that you might look to is the International Coaching Federation, ICF, which is the go-to, if you will, for coaching. And they have lots of core competencies, sets of core competencies for coaching both individuals and teams. And it's very strong focus on interpersonal skills. So again, these are just examples. Have you thought about them? Foundational counseling skills, right, Bryn? Yes, absolutely. I love that we're working through interconnected systems framework and other efforts to really go upstream and align our education and mental health systems. I learned so much from my colleagues who have mental health background. Absolutely, Brent, great point. You also might think of some of the more facilitator type skill sets that you would like people supporting change to have competency with. So we might label that as I might be in the facilitator role when I show up to a team meeting, especially in the beginning, like Bob said, when we're just leaning into building skills. So again, these are just examples. And, are there others to consider that you have, specifically defined as part of your expectations? A lot of these require us to walk right beside people as we're building their capacity, and we can, eventually fade that support. But they require a lot of time up front. So are there any others, as we're just kind of walking through this? We've looked at content, we've looked at some of those interpersonal facilitation type skills. Are there any other skill sets or buckets that you have identified as part of the expectations or the skill sets that you're supporting your support personnel to develop? And Bryn, I might add emotional intelligence to that. Lots of skills with the counseling and emotional intelligence. Meditation skills. Gordon, I love it. I think that is critical. And especially when I know I'm showing up to a team and I've got the role of like a transformational coach on, I am meditating before I go, afterwards, sometimes during. Absolutely. Meditation skills. Thank you, Gordon. Leadership skills like setting direction and vision, building capacity to collaborate. Oh, that's a really good one, Samantha. Monitoring progress. Yeah, how do we do that? How do we support these folks serving as coaches, behavior specialists, et cetera, to progress monitor? And what are they progress monitoring? And how will they know when the team or the organization has arrived or the individual? Adult wellness, SEL. Absolutely, Colleen. So critical right now, more than ever. How do we center this work in wellness and building that, as you say, community wellness? These are all great additions to, as you review your expectations for building capacity with skill sets, competencies. These are great additions. So Bob and I looked at our website because he mentioned all these free resources, and everything is free and there's lots of stuff. We tried to comb through to pull some things out. There is a coaching self-assessment. It's a little dated, and I think it's a great start. And it's a nice self-assessment in terms of, for me, I used it a lot when I first started out around my content and my transactional type coaching skills or facilitation skills. Not so much transformational coaching skills, but it's a great start. And I think Bob and I added to our to-do list that we might want to revisit this and expand upon it. So we certainly appreciate your feedback with meditation and leadership skills and wellness, all of these things that we might think to, enhance this instrument. And you may have others. The resource from USF with March and Gaunt has a great self-assessment as well for systems coaching. And we've used that at the state level in a couple places. It was a nice anchor, a nice start. So we want to take a pause at the end of this little chunk to invite you to share, what are you taking away from this quick exploration of skills, competencies, and content? Did it, invite you to think differently or invite you to add some things? I know I'm going to add some things now from your contributions. Any other considerations as you define? Because we get lots of calls from folks saying, well, we're going to have coaches. How do they define that? How do you advertise for that? What would that role look like? What we expect them to do. So let's pause and use the chat. What are your takeaways from this small chunk? Add the coach self-assessment to our practices. How diverse the set of skills, competencies. That's really good.
Wow, this is great.
Yes. I can't read that fast, though. Hold on. Yeah, Bryn, if you adapt that, you all do such beautiful work in Delaware of adapting and making things better. Please send it our way. Oh, Colleen, that's a great consideration. More structure or maybe intentionality. Yes. Yep. Elena Aguilera has lots of resources. Yes. I like the targeted work.
Yeah. I love the nurturing and guiding, right?
I love that too. Right. Gordon, where have you been all my life? I love the language you use, and I hope that our tech person can say we can save this chat because I don't want to lose this. This is great stuff here. Yeah. Love that this is an affirmation. It's nice to have that, isn't it? All right. Chat will be saved. We thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Bob again for the next chunk.
So we want to explore a process to build coaching capacity and what's the culture of coaching, because really we want to build a community of practice for coaches. And the best thing I can do oftentimes is link coaches to other coaches and say, problem solve. Because some of you may be dealing with some of the same issues, and as I kind of lead the district, I'm saying I want you to build your peer-to-peer coaching that will help support coaching as we go down the line. And I really think that relationships matter hugely. So if I have a choice to hire a coach, I kind of look at it as a three-legged stool. That one is interpersonal skills, which is about 50% of kind of the job, is how do we have those relationships. The other part is the ecology of the school that we're working in. What's the ecology if we're working in a high school or a large district versus a small district? Or the other leg of the stories is basically technical expertise, right? That we really need to have all of those components. But I think relationships, and Kimberly feels the same way, that relationships are hugely important, and that oftentimes a new coach kind of wants to get there in terms of what we're doing rather than trying to build those relationships, and really being a person that's supportive. So oftentimes, like, how can I help you, right? And both the team or the coach, how do I, and I want to take that time really to build, trust, buy-in, partnership, collaboration, because that will, when we go through the tough times, the relationships are really going to matter in terms of doing that. So that's one of the strong things that I look at in terms of the people that are coaches or training to be coaches, is really how do you build those relationships. And it might be with the principal, or it might be, certain people on the team that the coach has some challenges with. Like, how do we work to be able to do that? All right. So one question we have is, how do you uncover opportunities to connect and build relationships? Oh, we're great. Yeah, I love this. As a newer coach, I find myself relying on my interpersonal skills and building real relationships, where I work on building my own technical expertise. That's awesome, right? If you just go in with the technical expertise and you don't have the relationships, you're probably going to be challenging a situation. I'm always looking to make sure that people ask me back. And if I don't have that relationship and I'm not providing them support, then not going to ask me back, right? So the goal is those relationships really make a difference. Ask questions to find common interests, right? I always Google people before I have meetings with them to figure out, did we go to school together, or, what would be their interests? Because I think that's important in terms of coming up with commonalities. For me, I feel I level with them. Their guard comes down, right? That letting them know that I'm not coming in to change or get rid of things, right? I just want to help enhance the systems they already have in place. Exactly, right? And they're going too fast, but that keeping proximity, castles of adult SEL core practices in every meeting, welcoming, engaging, optimistic closures. So I always train my coaches to make sure you do glows and grows at the beginning, right? And at the end of the meetings, we have a way to look at, we do a simple reflection, which is, did this meeting meet our objectives in terms of what we want to do? Did this help facilitate the objectives? Did everyone have a voice in the room? By doing that, people can contribute to whether this was a viable meeting as well, right? Wow, a lot of stuff here, right? I love the 5-to-1, right? Redirection, yeah, right? It works for all of us, right? In terms of that. And, it actually came out of the marital literature, which those couples that had that type of 5-to-1 had longer marital relationships than those folks who didn't. So, a fun icebreaker right to start the meeting. I have one meeting I go to that the facilitator has gathered interesting facts of people in the room, and basically starts off the meeting by saying, this person has visited the Eskimos in Alaska. Which one of the people in the room is that person? So anything along those lines. Great ideas all the way. I'm glad we're saving this chat. Next, okay. And we really want to know kind of what direction are we helping to move folks along those lines, right? We want to go from coaching as a noun to coaching as a verb. We want to look at that. Oftentimes I work with coaches to help them analyze the data and put it into some type of visual format that they can really, look at what the meaningful outcomes would be. And are we getting better in terms of those outcomes? And it really grounds everybody, because if you don't have any data, from my perspective, everybody's right around the table. If you have some data, then it really helps us focus in terms of what we want to do. So I'm just in terms of, one is we're looking at in terms of fluency building. If we're starting off at the beginning, we're really trying to build that fluency, right? And we might be shadowing, observing. And you can see across all these wellness is in that, right? That we're looking at building people's wellness, whether it's our staff or whether it's our coaches or whether it's our students. My goal all the time is, how do I improve wellness? I was just coaching a high school, and the principal said, I just want to spend the rest of our time this year focusing on making school much more enjoyable for our staff and our students. So the PBS team is really spending that time to figure out, how do we make school more enjoyable for these high school students? And I said, that's awesome. That's exactly where we want to go, right? Is if school's more meaningful and happy for everybody, then everyone's going to do much better, right? Or we're looking at reflections, or we're looking at capacity building. And as we coach, we really want to start off with, the small things first, kind of what's our unit of analysis, and, is it one grade starting off, or is it the whole school, or kind of what would make the most sense in terms of starting off? Now, Kimberly, I know you have a number of great examples that you want to share as well, right?
Yeah, I'll just share one example of this, Bob, just to, expand upon what you just shared. And I haven't researched it, but I've replicated it with lots of different districts and states. And it involves front loading this notion of thinking about Vygotsky's, gradual release of responsibility, and using that I do, we do, you do model. And so just one quick story in a district who was just starting implementing MTSS, specifically the PBIS part of that. We talked about coaching and that driver for coaching. And we did kind of what would we want coaches to be doing? And they landed on systems coaching, team coaching, and individual coaching. So they did a resource map of coaching. Where are all the coaches in the district? And how can we look at repurposing some of their roles, or perhaps maybe we need to hire new people. That's really hard to do right now. But identifying those people and then starting with the end in mind, what do we want them to do? And then we used this process. We did the training, and then we pulled people together. And if you've used the tiered fidelity inventory, there's a walkthrough. We expanded that, and we call it a learning walk, because it truly is reciprocal learning for everyone involved, the coaches, the team, the school. And we basically have people start out shadowing. So come with me, let's do this walk together. And we model it, like many of you have said. And we talk to administrators and students and staff. We go into classrooms and do visits, all non-evaluative, supportive, and learning. And with this district, we started out that way. And like when we go into a classroom, we might go in groups of 3s or 4s. And we take some data on what we see. And then we come out of that classroom and we have a dialogue to try to get us to a really consistent understanding and measure of what we're noticing. And so we do some inter-rater reliability, and we come back together and we anchor all of our discoveries and feedback and considerations to our tiered fidelity inventory, because that was one of the expectations this district identified as what they want these coaches supporting. And we keep doing it, and we work in partnership. And so when the coach says, I'm ready to do this part of it, I'm going to lead, then I can start fading that. And I can tell you in 2 districts alone that we've done this, we don't support Tier 1 any longer. They have the capacity to do this, and they do it in such an innovative and sustainable way. And now we're shifting our coaching and consulting support to Tier 2 and building that. So it's just an example. It's a front-loaded way of doing this. But then, as you know, like they get to the we do and the capacity is there. So we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about this process, that it takes you below the level of information you get in training to go a little bit deeper dive with it. And then it starts to build a culture. So we've had principals actually had lead teachers go into classrooms as part of the classroom because the culture was safe and supported that. And they, reported back, this was the best experience I've ever had. I don't get to go out of my classroom. So it's a very supportive process, and it is meant to do all of the bullets that you see there. And we start small and then we expand it. I think this is you too, Bob, but it would help if I advance. Voila.
Okay. So we really want to move from coaching as a noun, right, to coaching as a verb as we build that culture of coaching, that we really want to look at, what are the action steps that coaches are doing to support their teams? How do we really look at in terms of breaking those things down? And that coaching assessment will help you. As Kimberly said, it's a little old at this particular point in time, and part of our task is to update that. But it's useful in terms of at least starting off in terms of that. And certainly that tool, if you may have more wise ideas in terms of what you want to add or subtract, so that tool can be used as a starting off point in terms of kind of what you're looking for.
And so I love that idea, Bob, of moving from coaching as a noun to a verb, especially since our country has experienced the great resignation kind of movement due to so many things happening. And so how do we, again, starting from what are we calling folks? What are the skill sets, the competencies, the knowledge? How do we build capacity? And I might invite us to think, how do we look beyond the coaches and start to identify some of those core sets of skills that we have naturally occurring places in our work that we can add these to. So just a couple examples we're going to give you here very quickly is one is that staying curious, and I love, and I don't remember where this originated, but I read it every day, especially after I do my meditation, Gordon. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right. Like, how do I stay in that space of curiosity? When we look at some of the skill sets, like the interpersonal skills, empathy was not there. But we have unpacked empathy. I have unpacked it for myself. And I use Brene Brown's research, like what are the absolute skill sets that we can teach and build fluency around? And if you unpack it, it's listening to understand, assuming best intentions, practice perspective taking, believe people when they share their experiences and feelings. And someone mentioned earlier about questions, and I think it was Alicia, maybe she said, asking questions. Can we start to model that as leaders, as coaches, as consultants, and build a culture where we're not here to be right, we're here to get it right. We're here to walk in partnership. Someone said they use Jim Knight's work, partnership principles, right? How do we do that? And so there's some natural things that we do within this work that lend themselves to building beyond ourselves, these skill sets that we're building our capacity with to enhance the culture or to add to the culture. And so this is just an example of a bank, if you will, of, you might call them expectations, values. During team meetings, we might call them norms or agreements. And I have learned in the last few years the importance of norms and agreements for any time we form a group or a team. And so as a coach, it's one of the first things I want to know. Where are your agreements? Are they reflective of some of those interpersonal skills? And so you can see these are example of banks of skills that teams might consider. We've had schools add things like these to their school-wide matrices. Like, we want everyone to do some of these things. We want everyone to have empathy. How do we unpack that and anchor it to this instructional approach to social, emotional, behavioral support for all of us in the school community? I'm going to have Bob talk to his comic relief.
As you can see, I have stupid cartoons. Kimberly allowed me to bring this in. So, hey, Mike, what are the other alternatives you can try? So I think part of our role with that technical expertise is really to problem solve with the teams in terms of what are some of the, and I always go back to Ron Horner. He taught us to do the simplest thing that will get the biggest outcome. And, nobody has any extra time. So how do we come up with interventions that are time efficient as well and improve wellness? And I have one district that across the district, as part of their coaching, is they laid out people to look at the data. And these were the 4 or 5 different questions that you want to ask about attendance, or want to ask about office discipline referrals, or failures, or tardies, or whatever their meaningful outcomes might be. to help them in terms of, because the teams were having a little bit of difficulty in terms of, what do we do with this data? Do we just admire this data, or do we really come up with an action plan that would help going forward? And so they laid out the expectations is, when you look at your data, this is really that, what kind of questions you should be asking. And then you could ask other queries beyond that, but at least these are the basic questions in terms of doing that. So our goal is, can we figure out, what's the easiest way we can get the biggest outcomes? And that's where kind of our technical expertise. And I kind of rely on the schools to come up with these things, and then kind of help them facilitate going down the line. But to the extent that they can come up with their own solutions, then, if we got the fourth graders, we got problems in the cafeteria, I can certainly come up with a resource-intensive, evidence-based cafeteria program, but maybe we just want to hold the fourth graders before the fifth graders come out, because that might be the simplest solution.
Yeah, the questions are just so powerful. And I love what Colleen added. I just wrote it down for myself. Model EMR, establish, maintain, and restore relationships. We're all learning, Colleen. And, having that awareness for ourselves, I think you're absolutely right, is critical. We use Atlas and other protocols to make help. Absolutely, Samantha, those are great tools. And this notion of questions, it really is, as Alicia said earlier, one of our most powerful things that we can do. And I have this book. You'll see Michael, I know I'm not pronouncing the man's name correctly, Stanier. His work, like in Jim Knight, he pulls from his work and other places who lead some of the coaching efforts. But this has been one of my absolute favorite tools to enhance my practice around really effective evocative questions. And we have some resources at pbis.org. I absolutely love this resource. It's multiple pages. And I know that, yes, thank you, Austin, for putting that in the link in the chat. But it's fantastic. It goes through all the tiers and gives really great, both transactional and transformational types of coaching questions to move us ahead. And earlier, Bryn mentioned wellness or building into agenda, an agenda item. Using questions, though, in your agenda. If I go into a meeting these days and I see a bulleted list of 30 items for the agenda, I kind of get a little anxiety, right? And that's one of those moments, Gordon, when I got to get into my meditation, or at least some really good breathing, because I know we're probably not going to be really effective. And so using questions, building your team norms or agreements, whatever you refer to them as, into your agendas. These are naturally occurring places for us to start embedding the skill sets that we are using to support change so that we can build the capacity of others. All right, Bob.
So in terms of like moving forward, right, one of the things you want to look at is what's your current efforts and how do you look at the steps for enhancing and strengthening what we already are doing. So, and we all always feel that assessment should lead to intervention. So some of the sample ways that you can assess as you're building your coaching capacity or your systems coaching capacity would be some of the tools from PBS. So, for example, there's MTS PBS tools free from PBIS apps.org. So it's really helping guide the school in terms of developing an action plan. If we look at the tiered fidelity inventory, that's a treatment integrity tool, or also on PBS apps is a self-assessment survey that asks staff what's in place, what's not in place. I love that because the team can say, yeah, this is definitely in place. But when you ask the staff, they're saying, I don't see it. So it's great to kind of build your action plans from that, or the school climate survey that really brings in perspectives of families, staff, and kids, or the school safety. And if you already have a school climate survey that you're using, oftentimes I just tell people to continue to use it because it's great. One of our goals is to progress monitor. And part of my goal is to try to teach coaches how to really progress monitor the data, because oftentimes people don't see the progress they're making. And one of our goals as a coach is to be support to recognize all the accomplishments. So when they do the glows and grows, yep, we've seen decreases in office system referrals. Do they actually know how to manipulate the data to look at the trends in terms of where things are going? All right, so there are other PBS resources. Kimberly's done an awesome job spending her weekends looking at in terms of great resources for coaching. So these are up on the PBS Center coaching. These are some webinars that will give you some further information.
And this tool is actually from NIRN, the National Implementation Research Network. I hope I got that acronym right for some reason. Yeah, good. I love this tool at the district or state level. Virginia has adapted it. They've done a brilliant job with their work in VTSS. You can go to I didn't put this link in there, or maybe I did. No, I didn't. I put the one to NIRN here, but they actually took it and they created drop down so they could standardize it and use it as a data set to inform, supporting coaches. Like, how are we spending our time? Where are we spending the most time? How's that working? And they changed some of these as well. But it's a great tool to kind of put at the balcony view for all the things we've just discussed. What are we calling folks? What are our expectations? How do we define skill sets, content, competencies? How do we measure them or use also data to inform the work that they're doing, like Bob just went through? How do we build capacity? And this, for me, is the anchor that holds it all together, an example of one of those things. So, yes, on a weekend, Bob, I dove into this tool with my popcorn, and Brene Brown had not released her HBO series yet. So there you go. That's what I did. There's lots of resources here. And Cheryl asked a question about the TFI, if there's an action plan. Thank you, Karen. Karen's already on top of it and put an example into the chat. Appreciate it. And Karen made a brilliant comment earlier that I wanted to bring forth, and then I forgot, about how do we build capacity, or, go beyond the noun to the verb. And Gottman's research that Bob referenced on the 5-to-1, the relationship building, using that as the coach, being extremely mindful of that, to always notice and give feedback. Because as many of you said earlier in the chat, there's a lot of stuff going on and it's hard work. And isn't it nice to be affirmed, either self-affirming or having someone else notice, hey, I completed this survey on time. Like, I just got reminded, I was like, I need to acknowledge that and affirm that. Like, I know you got a lot going on. I really appreciate you doing that. So thank you, Karen, for that feedback. During that weekend, I found lots of resources. So we are happy. I think the PowerPoint will be posted and our tech person is willing to help us get these to you. But there's lots of things already out there. Never reinvent the wheel. You're awesome, Austin. Thank you. Lots of implementation and blueprint resources. I love the tips many of you indicated when we looked at the March and Gaunt content areas. Number 3 was that area of focus. If you're not familiar with TIPS, team-initiated problem solving, it changed my world. And when I first saw it, I think I ran the other way, tripped over a few rocks and so forth, and didn't want to look back. But then I embraced it and I learned it. And I think it is one of the best things I've ever used as a consultant and a coach to build that foundation that Bryn was talking to in terms of effective and efficient teams. They're the foundation of this work, the core of this work. Structures and processes. Someone mentioned earlier that they use protocols or Atlas, and I love a good structure and protocol. So thank you for sharing those resources. Here are a few others. And here's that really cool resource from our colleagues at University of South Florida. And here's a way to look at that innovation configuration map of your systems coaches as well. So lots of resources. And we just want to pause for a moment here just to think about, okay, we've taken you through this progression of beginning to end with lots of great possibilities from everyone on this webinar. And we're curious to know, If you start with the end in mind, what would your ideal system of support for change look like? What would it sound like? What would people be doing and saying? Look at what you have in place now. What changes would you see reflected in data, stories, experiences, and maybe even relationships, I might add, thanks to our colleague who added the EMR, I think it was. Thank you. And maybe use the chat to offer some feedback or considerations that are kind of moving around in your mind that we could all benefit from, or thinking about what do you already have in place? Are we starting with what we have? And then what are some things we can do to lean into 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the line? So let's give a moment to share in the chat. And I like using the chat now that I know that we can share it. Mary Ann it's Austin, it's going to be on the website. I don't want to put you on the spot, Austin, but I know there's a specific place on our pbis.org website. I use the search, Marianne, a lot and put in School Climate Transformation Grant. And that's how I found other recorded webinars and so forth in the past. Any other ways you're thinking about that we can all kind of borrow your thoughts to move us forward in terms of where you are and where you see some small steps to lean into this, to enhance what you're already doing, or maybe a large step, a 12-month step. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Austin.
While you're thinking, if there's anything else, there we go. Okay. I love the layers of support, Bren. In that district example I gave you, they do their own PLCs now. They support their own coaches with tier 1. It's totally hands off. We're now moving into tier 2 and having those levels of support. I love that. The systems coaching reflection. Yeah, it's a great resource, Colleen. You're going to spend your weekend on it too. No, I don't encourage that. That doesn't embrace wellness. That's a non-example. Don't do that. Besides, Bridgerton just released a new season. So we operate in a tiered system. Yeah, Gordon, I think you made that comment earlier. Yeah, organizing. What do you do for all, some, and a few? And I use that practice as well. I think it's fantastic, Gordon. Ooh.
Wow. Yep.
Samantha, yeah.
That's great.
That's fantastic, Jason.
Yeah. I love the community of practice that Jason's talking about. That's really helpful to have to support coaches supporting each other around the challenges that they may have, because some of the best ideas come from the people that are also having similar challenges.
Absolutely. Well, in this last minute, please feel free to reach out to Bob or myself. If you're marinating over your lunch and you think of something else, it's marinate your thoughts. Just feel free to email us. And Austin made it even easier. Any final thoughts from anyone in these last 30 seconds as we close out our time together today? Yeah, my thank you to everyone. I have at least three big takeaways from the chat. So I can't wait to get my hands on that. I think I can do it myself. But please let us know if there's anything else. We thank you for your time. We know that's your most valuable asset.
Yeah, thanks for all the comments in the chat. I think again, it's very useful to share and help problem solve with each other and promote each other's wellness, because we all need that at this particular point in time.